before I sound overly critical of a refugee program, I've dedicated my life to helping refugees, and I give Justin Trudeau 10 out of 10 for wanting to help people. So that's terrific. But after that, the execution of this plan is horrible. He said that he wanted to bring in 25,000 of these people who already are in the pipe, people who've already been pre-selected, who are already being sponsored by Canadian sponsors. And he announces that he's going to bring in 25,000 by December 31st. What he didn't know, possibly because he didn't ask, is that we only had 8,400 people who meet the criteria that he had. 8,400 people who've been sponsored by Canadian families and Canadian groups to bring them to Canada, and we only had 8,400. So now we're in a situation where in order to keep his election promise, we now have to find 17,000 people who do not meet the criteria that he has set out. So the whole situation is a little bit odd to me, but that's where we find ourselves.
One of the things I've heard is that if we're drawing from the refugee camps in Lebanon, in Jordan, I guess they've abandoned Turkey. That was one of the countries they said originally. What we're doing is we're allowing the United Nations, which is, these camps are run by Muslim, of course, United Nations staff. We're allowing them to choose from the pools of people they want. I've heard that many of these true minorities, the Yazidis, the Kurds, the Christians, don't want to go to these refugee camps because they're still victimized in those refugee camps, again, by the other Syrian Muslims who are refugees. So even once you're in Jordan or Lebanon or Turkey, there is still violence where the Syrian Muslims rape or are physically violent in other ways to Yazidis, Christians. So we are actually under-proportioning the true victims that you and I talked about before. Have you heard any concerns about that letting a third party, the United Nations, with their own agendas and interests, select from these camps, that is going to skew this even further?
Well, of course. For example, if I had escaped Syria because one of the problems I was facing is that I'm gay. Well, I'm not going to go to a refugee camp and announce that I'm gay because there are people in those refugee camps who are going to want to do me harm for the same reasons that they want to do me harm in Syria. So I'm going to be fairly quiet about that. I can go on about this, but one of the problems that we also have with this whole thing is that we in the immigration bar, we're waiting for the government's criteria. You're going to pick 25,000 people. Well, there's about 1 million or 2 million people who are displaced. What's the criteria that we're going to select, that we're going to use to select?